Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Ryan, and today I'm joined by
Nerdarchy Dave.
Nerdarchy Ted.
And today we talk about the problem of perception.
If you want to jump down to the description below, you can sign up for Nerdarchy the News Letter. It's a great way to get weekly gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
So what is the problem with perception?
Right, so if you notice, most of your sort of scoutingly sort of characters, your rogues and your rangers and what have you, and really the majority of players, because perception is the super skill, like it's the skill that most of the time matters. So most players are going to look to be proficient in it. Like in games I've run, I've noticed that quite a bit. And then also too, your scouting characters, their passive perception is so high that literally there's no point in putting traps in your game because they're going to be spotted, right? Like,
so
as it
what do
is,
you consider too high?
So if you have a passive perception of 15 plus, by most things that are in any book that's been published as published adventures, the character automatically spots it.
So there's a couple factors that you have to make sure you're not ignoring as the GM. One, are they moving at half move? No,
right.
Add 5.
Right.
Are they using a light source?
Yeah.
Not dark vision, and not on the outskirts of a torch or a lantern. No, add 5. So that's two important factors that have to be, that I think gets ignored a lot.
Yeah, I've definitely been thinking about the disadvantage mechanic as well, especially if there's an encounter going on while they could be triggering that trap. I've also been thinking about that. But even so, like if the DC of a trap is a 14 and it goes to a 19, if the character, depending on a super low level party is less likely to see that, but a mid-level party, again, that sort of scout character who has, say, expertise in perception, so your rogue that's optimized to do that sort of thing, using passive perception by raw doesn't really work. For if you're putting something in to be a hindrance to the party and it doesn't go off, it's not actually a hindrance, right? So,
well, it depends upon what your point of putting those traps in. If you're putting those traps in because you want them to take the damage, well, then you can always bump those DCs to a level that's going to make it harder for them. If you feel, okay, well, I'm putting it in there so that there's an obstacle to be overcome, the players overcome it, yay, they've done what you wanted, what it was there for. To me as the DM, if I'm putting traps in there, I'm not putting it in there because I want them to take damage. I'm putting it in there because it's an obstacle and it may go off, it might not. To me, it doesn't matter either way.
Yeah. Well, I only find it interesting, really, for traps. Like, I think damage that players just take is usually just bullshit. Like, if it's just, like, for me, I'd rather have it be like, oh, this trap triggers, and then these intelligent humanoids that are like 100 feet, 150 feet, hear the trap go off, and so the trap has consequences.
Yeah. Getting to exploit those type of things that are set up, that's definitely advantageous for an adversary.
Right. Or the idea that, like, a fight's going on, the creature that occupies the place knows of the trap, they're intelligent, they're sentient, or whatever, and they're going to exploit the fact that they know where the trap is, and the players might stumble into it, which is going to hinder the fight, and again, make it more difficult, make it have interesting sort of consequences for the players.
So I've seen, recently I saw a discussion, I don't remember where, but it was talking about, investigation and perception in conjunction with traps, where, perception, or even, an investigation type scene. The idea is you need perception to find the clues, and then you need investigation to
find the mechanisms.
To tell you what that means.
Yeah. So the way I've been told, the way it's supposed to work, is perception lets you find it, investigation lets you know how to disarm it, thieves' tools allows you to disarm it. It's a 3-step process.
Yeah. So the chances, I mean, you could be optimal at doing all of those things, but your chances are that's a huge investment.
Well, I mean, that's why a rogue gets so many skills. But that being said, too, once you investigate it and you know how the mechanism of the trap works, you don't necessarily have to disarm it. Like, you're like, oh, just don't step on that flagstone and you're good. So there could be the idea of you don't really have to disarm every trap you encounter. Some of them you may have to, but some of them there might be like, oh, you see that tripwire? Just don't step on it and we're good.
Well, that's true, but then it leads to other problems like, oh, now you're running away from a monster. And you have to remember not to step on that tripwire.
Oh yeah, no, that becomes a very interesting complication. But adventurers, like, being murder hobos that, like, just kill things and take their stuff, I don't really see, like, long-sightedness being a key feature of the kind of person that goes and, like, just kills things and takes their stuff. Because by that law, like, anything that has, like, relatives should be after adventurers, you know, when you think about it.
Everyone knows monsters don't have relatives.
They don't have family. They're not, monsters aren't people.
They're not loved.
Yeah.
Well, so 5e does incorporate some things, maybe not for traps, but in general, like, there's definitely ambush monsters that defeat
all
perception.
Yeah.
Yes.
Other than, I would argue, possibly some magical means.
Right. So you've got your animated armor, which just looks like a statue. You've got piercers. You've got gargoyles. You've got dark mantles.
Oh no, the dark mantles don't have the appearance thing. So sorry.
Yeah. Was it chokers or cloakers or one of those things? Kind of
cloaker, yeah.
And their cousins, the trousers.
Trousers, yeah. You don't want the trousers. Yeah.
It gets ugly when you put those on.
Yeah. So, but basically, things that could help you. So you have the ambush monsters that literally a player, just in short of magical means, can't discern that there's something other than inanimate object.
Right.
We talked about the idea of definitely if the characters are moving at regular speed. Or distracted. Like, I'd say a character in the throes of combat is distracted most of the time. Like, they're just distracted, and so they're going to take that penalty, the -5 penalty there. I'd also say too that, like, so you have like a melee going on, and a character wants to, or monster wants to, like, stealth around. I consider all those people in the melee to be distracted against the sneaking character. Because you're worried about the guy swinging a sword right in front of you or an axe. You're not, the guy skulking off the side, they're so far off in your periphery that you're not going to be paying attention. Or, you know, like, or I would say maybe the person swinging has an advantage at that point. Because they should be paying attention to the guy that's striking at them. Or monster.
I would agree.
So, but that's exclusively for passive perception. Because if you're making a roll, then you're actually looking. But that, you know, so that being said,
isn't perception checks actually an action though? Like, if you're going to make a perception check, isn't that an action?
I'm not entirely sure.
I think that would generally fall into the interact with an object.
So you're kind of searching, so that it is kind of an action.
So, I mean, if you're walking at half pace and you're specifically paying attention to everything around you, then yes, you're walking slower, you have the ability to see more, and that's why you don't suffer the -5.
So I think if you're using distraction, pace, and lighting, you could add like 15 to the difficulty for passive perception,
and that takes your high check of a 15 up to the nearly impossible of a 30.
Yeah. Well, I also just don't like the way passive perception works because it makes me think of Baldur's Gate, and like when you pass a trap, when your rogue with your high perception passes a trap and you spotted that
it's
trap.
like the Batman games where you have the detective mode, where everything lights up.
Well, so I mean, this wasn't as sophisticated. Baldur's Gate 1 was and I think I played Baldur's Gate 2, but like where the trap would appear outlined in red,
right?
Yeah, like, and it just seems like. It seems too video gamey for me, the way that it functions. So I was thinking the idea of if their passive perception is high enough to notice it, they get a roll. So you just call for a roll because there's tension in that. Like, they don't know what they're rolling for. Mm-hmm. Or you could say could you give me a perception check? Or you could have all the players' perceptions written down, and then you just call for a roll and have them give you the result. So you could do that as well. And they don't necessarily know what they're rolling for, but they're probably thinking there's consequences to that roll. Mm-hmm. So there's like tension in that, and so they could obviously do better than that baseline 10 of a passive perception, but there's that 45% chance or less that they do worse, and they are going to blunder into the difficulty that you put there for them, the hazard or the trap.
Well, that being said, though, the player put those resources to have that skill, have that perception, or whatever. So, if they're putting them there, it's not going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there always has to be a counter for what they did. And going back to what you said about how it feels video gaming, how many times have you read a book, novel, there's a story, a movie, TV series, whatever, or one of the characters grabs the other character before they step on the tripwire or the booby trap, or they step on the mine and then the other character realizes don't move. And even if someone was, so skilled that they're like, oh my God, you just stepped on them, you stepped on something, don't move, and they figure it out. But if they don't have those other skills to get you off the mine, it's gonna go off, and which speaks more to a higher level investment from that player into that skill set.
Right, and to have those types of situations, like it takes a particular character to have high skills in investigation, which is off of intelligence, perception, which is off of wisdom, thieves' tools, which is off of dexterity. So having 3 skills that you're having expertise in, proficient in, and the decent stats to make it, that requires a certain character build. And really, if that's what you're going to do, allow them to do it, and just
you're not by having them roll, you're not depriving them of anything. Yeah, like they still have their numerical bonuses. You're just throwing some randomness into it.
But if you're having a character that has already put the points into the system that says, well, there's this.
Or or even more so, if they take like the observation feat, you allow feats in your game. They took the observant feat, and you allow feats in your games that specifically affects
the passive.
Well,
Ryan was saying off camera that if he's going to require that roll, he'd want to give them that extra 5.
To give them that +5 because they took that feat. So, and it is like you're still saying that it's something that they're noticing kind of out of the corner of their eye and their periphery. So that makes sense to me that, in those sort of observant moments, you'd get that bonus.
And, well, here's the other thing, too. We always have to remember why they went to the passive scores anyway.
And that was to essentially speed up the game.
Speed up the game, and what happens once you ask a player for a roll? Instantly, they start metagaming.
They know.
Mm-hmm. They know something's up, or you, the DM, has to roll for them.
Yeah. Well, that just happens. Like, anytime something arriving toward an encounter is going to happen, like, the tempo of the game, the tenor of the game changes anyway. Yes. So, really, at the first moment any player has to roll for anything, the game changes because now some people are better than others about reining in metagaming ideas and knowledge, but some people that's going to slip in regardless of what's going on, whether that's a perception check or something else.
Right.
Well, I disagree because passive perception says that there was no roll involved. We used a hard number, and your hard number failed, so the thing happens, or you make the discovery. And discovery doesn't have to be a trap. It could be you notice some markings on the wall to your left.
Right.
Yeah. It invites the problem of I really, as a GM or as a DM, I really want them to fail this roll. I know exactly what their passive perception is because I have an awareness of what their character sheet is. So I just make it 1 or 2 points above, what they could possibly attain. Or I set the circumstances that unless they did every single thing that they could possibly do to observe this thing, this is just going to happen. So it's it almost becomes deterministic. The idea of, I'm hardlining, by fate, by decree, as GM, making sure that circumstances are such that I'm going to get them on this. Whereas, the dice invite chance.
Well, I don't know the page, but if you open to the DMG, to the trap section, it goes, okay, this trap is, easy, medium, hard, deadly.
You mean the damage by level? There's actually, and also a great handy table on if you have the DM screen. That damage by level there is a fantastic
But then
resource.
it also gives the difficulty levels, right? And really, if you decide this is hard, there's a number for that. I think it's 20. Moderate is 15. You're right. You can set it a point above or below or whatever the player has. And like as a GM, like I mean, if you need a random die roll not to do that stuff to your players, there's bigger issues going on, and you're going to do other things anyway. But if there's a system there for you to go, how difficult is this check supposed to be, and you use those guidelines, it's not a problem. You go, oh well, they always make difficult. They always make the difficult passive perception because that's what their passive perception is, or they always make it if as long as they're taking their time, or it's a well lit area and they have that resources available to so they can see well. But if your rogue is always up front of the party scouting, they're probably always taking a plus 10 to the DC.
Unless they're moving at half speed, or and here's the interesting thing too is like for light sources, like if you have dark vision, that mitigates that penalty, right?
No. That you're considered dim light, -5. I think they incorporated it. Like you can see well enough to function, but everything is always dim light. So you still need a light source.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting sort of thing. And then also too, when I think about group perception checks and non-ambush monsters, but monsters that are going to be doing an ambush, right? Like, if you're letting everyone at the table make a perception roll and you have 4 to 6 players, the odds of somebody rolling above a 15 are pretty damn high. Like it's just very likely to happen. So if you do your perception in such a way that like if one person notices, they can alert everyone, and you're getting the drop on monster doesn't get the drop. I like to think of perception as that split second before shit goes down. So your one character isn't surprised.
Yeah, that's fine.
But everybody else is just like, oh shit. Like that's
right.
It's just like the jump scare moments in a horror movie or something like that. Like you're that level of like off put.
Well, I will say, so the way I would handle that though is, okay, the monster knows they're there, the one character knows the monster's there, initiative between them.
Yeah.
If the character beats the monster in initiative, he could warn the rest of the party. I think that would be accurate. And they'd have a split second to not be surprised.
Yeah, I don't know.
But, I mean, it all depends upon what you're looking for with the surprise. Is this a situation where you're trying to use like an assassin's ability where it requires the surprise, or are you looking at it just like, well, I just want my monster to go first? Well, then let the monster go first.
I don't know.
It's not 3rd edition where we have the surprise round negates your dex to AC because you're not dodging.
But it is significant if that NPC is an assassin.
Well,
that really matters.
Unless you're falling into that specific situation, doesn't matter.
Well, yes and no. Like it might and it might not. It depends on what the exact circumstance. Because fucking actually look at the Minds of Delver box set. Like that goblin encounter, if the goblins get a surprise on a surprise round on the party generally, because goblins are sneaky as shit, and it's a first level party, and also they're pre-gens, so they might not be spec'd out to do that. That encounter can kill a party. Like that goblin encounter could absolutely kill a party. So the monsters going first absolutely matters. Like I obviously wouldn't want to set an encounter to kill the party. But to make the encounter a challenging one, maybe that would be the case. So I think in that instance, it does really matter.
Well, you could do something interesting too, where maybe you give the monsters advantage on initiative because against the rest of the party, like almost like they have the default initiative, say, of whatever they rolled against the player that's aware of them, but they lost. So the rest of the party go, well, you know what, you guys get an initiative against them, but I'm going to roll a second initiative for the monster with advantage, and just to see if it beats any of the other players. So they will act before any of the players that it beats. So it's almost, I mean, it might be a level of complexity that you don't want in the game.
Yeah.
But for those dire situations where you think it's going to make a big difference, you can stack the order that way. So like, okay, the player that noticed and won initiative, well, he's going to go first, and part of his action is to shout out. We then figure out what else you're going to do. Let's resolve the rest of the initiative and see how it's going to go between the players and the monster with initiative or with advantage. So he rolls, he takes his higher number, and then we begin to populate the rest of the initiative. We figure out the order. Okay, you, the player who noticed, finish your action.
Yeah. See, now that's very complicated.
Although I think that would actually, like, that's 3 dice rolls that can be resolved pretty quickly, really, at the table. Like, it takes longer to explain it to actually execute on that.
I agree.
That's true, but me personally as a GM, I'd be like, oh, you beat the monster in initiative that was trying to sneak up on the party. Okay, you can warn them as part of your action. I don't think it's a big deal.
Again,
but every GM has to run the game how they want.
I mean, I think it matters because, like,
because you want to screw your players
for encounter balance. Yeah, because I want to screw my players. For encounter balance, like, so if you think it's very likely that the monster is going to get the drop on the party, that's a significant more of a threat, right? So maybe your monster's a little weaker. Whereas if it's likely that the majority of your party is going to get to act in that opening volley, that opening round, now you want that monster to have a little more staying power because it's not going to inflict as much damage and the party's going to get to act on it, so you want it to be around to still manage to be some sort of threat to the party.
That's just gonna come down to how much do you
love
feel
your monsters.
No, I was saying how much you feel that combat is important to the game. I know I've thrown monsters out there that I expected to be a challenge, and they got their asses kicked, and I'm like, well, that didn't go as planned.
How much did your players complain about that?
They didn't.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. So what? Your monster was a pushover and you thought it was going to be tough. It happens all the time. And sometimes I do an encounter and go, ooh, they almost died. Oops. You know?
And that can happen if you don't if the dice go in the favor of your monster and not in the favor of your players, it's going to have over the course of a game that swing.
Wait, those are the swings of balances where you're like, I want to push them a little bit in this encounter, but I don't want to miscalculate enough that I TPK the party.
Well, so then it comes down to, as the GM, you have to learn to let go of control, because you know what? Sometimes you have a plan.
Sometimes party members die.
Yeah, well, but going both ways. Like, you have a plan for that encounter, but just because your players played a certain way or luck was on their side, whatever, your difficult encounter that you wanted was a pushover for them. You know, you get them on the next one, maybe.
The hardest thing is if it swings the other way and you annihilate the party, well, now you just have to try and figure out, well, how do I keep the campaign moving? How do I rectify the situation? Are the dead players have the ability to come back to life? Do they just have to roll up new characters? You know, you have to figure that out right then and there. Is there a wandering NPC that might be able to lend assistance? Can the party actually mitigate their issues with what they actually have?
No, you have a character sheet funeral where you put them all into a folder and then you dig a little hole in the backyard and put the character sheets in there. Buried over. Somebody's playing taps in the background.
Pyres.
Your surviving players just wish they had a lower perception so that they didn't have to witness the carnage.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
the horror.
Since we're way off topic now at this point, let's ask you guys, what do you think about perception in D&D? How do you handle passive perception? Is it perfect the way it is? Do you always forget about those pesky disadvantages to passive perception? Let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out on nerdarchy.com.
Or you can also get some sweet Nerdarchy swag over on nerdarchy.com.
So until next time,
stay nerdy. There's your rogues and your rangers and what have you. And really, the majority of players, because perception is the super skill, like, it's the skill that most of the time matters. So most players are going to look to be proficient in it. Like, in games I've run, I've noticed that quite a bit. And then also, too, your scouting characters, their passive perception is so high that literally there's no point in putting traps in your game because they're going to be spotted, right? Like,
so, not on the outskirts of a torch or a lantern. No, add 5. So that's two important factors that have to be that I think gets ignored a lot.
Yeah,
of times.
I have definitely been thinking about the disadvantage mechanic as well, especially if there's an encounter going on while they could be triggering that trap. I've also been thinking about that. But even so, like if the DC of a trap is a 14 and it goes to a 19, if the character, depending on a super low level party is less likely to see that, but a mid-level party, again, that sort of scout character who has, say, expertise in perception, so your rogue that's optimized to do that sort of thing, using passive perception by raw doesn't really work. For if you're putting something in to be a hindrance to the party, and it doesn't go off, it's not actually a hindrance, right? So,
well, it depends upon what your point of putting those traps in.
Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Ryan, and today I'm joined by
Nerdarchy Dave.
Nerdarchy Ted.
And today we talk about the problem of perception.
If you want to jump down to the description below, you can sign up for Nerdarchy the News Letter. It's a great way to get weekly gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
So what is the problem with perception?
Right. So if you notice, most of your sort of scoutingly sort of character, as it is,
What do you consider too high?
So if you have a passive perception of 15 plus, by most things that are in any book that's been published as published adventures, the character automatically spots it.
So,
So
there's a couple factors that you have to make sure you're not ignoring as the GM. One, are they moving at half move? No,
Right.
add 5.
Right.
Are they using a light source?
Yeah.
Not dark vision, and